online online course. So this is not actually training that satisfied the reasonable suspicion training. So I think we included that in the blurb. So if you're here to get trained on that, this is basically a webinar to show you how to access the online course on our e-learning platform. So with that, I'll get started. And before we get started, I'd like to start this webinar by going over some housekeeping and explaining how GoToWebinar works. Basically, the GoToWebinar control panel is on the right side of your screen. Right side of your screen, you can open and close your control panel by clicking the orange arrow on the Grab tab. You can move the control panel anywhere on your screen by clicking and dragging. To view full screen, you can view this presentation in full screen mode by clicking the screen icon on the Grab tab. Under audio, select audio to use your computer's mic and speakers, or select phone call and you will see the phone number, access code, and your audio pin. And we highly recommend this option. The audio seems to work a lot better. If you're having trouble hearing a speaker, let us know via the questions box. Questions. Submit questions during the webinar via the questions box. We will answer as many questions as you can at the end of the webinar. If time allows, we will also take questions via phone or mic and speakers. Click the raise hand icon in the Grab tab. When it is your turn, we will unmute you. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted at nationalrtap.org/webinars within 1 week. A version of the presentation slides will be made available after the webinar. A transcript of the recording can be requested by emailing info@nationalrtap.org. I just received a message that our other presenter is having trouble logging in. I'm going to have to pause this webinar for a brief period while we can get them logged in. She's the subject matter expert that we're using for this webinar, so I apologize. I'll be back shortly. Thank you. Diana needs a re-invite for that webinar. Can you send that to her?
I was just sending her an email.
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. She just replied to mine.
Oh, she needs the re-invite?
Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome back. This is Neil Rodriguez at National RTAP. So we'll get started shortly. We just had a little delay. One of our presenters is having trouble logging in. Shouldn't hold us up too much, but we're going to take a short pause for 5 minutes. Please stay on. Well, yes, Diane will be calling in here soon, but in the meantime, I'll go ahead and get started with my portion, maybe modify it a little until she can get on. So today's webinar is an overview of this reasonable suspicion training for supervisors that we put together. We hired a company to help produce an online version that can be uploaded to our e-learning platform. And the subject matter expert that they selected to do the project was Diana Byrnes. She's a certified substance abuse program manager at the Center for Urban Transportation Research at the University of South Florida. And I am Neil Rodriguez, the project manager, and I oversee the online e-learning system here at National RTAP. I oversee the conversion of some of our hard copy training modules into e-learning versions. So, our platform basically was launched in 2016, and we've been building a library of courses that have been able to access online, and I'll give you a little overview of that. So this is the way I plan to have the webinar today. We might change it up a little bit, but I'm going to do a demo of our e-learning overview. It's located at elearning.nationalrtap.org. You'll see in the handouts, I have some handouts attached to this webinar, some PDFs on how to get started, getting started guide, e-learning handout, a tech brief we put together when we launched this course, and reasonable suspicion training for supervisors tech brief. So you can download those and review them, and that's pretty much everything you'll need to get started on this online course. But I'm still going to go over and do a demo for you. So this is the home screen for when you go to register. If you go to elearning.nationalrtap.org, and you'll see up in the top right, there's a register link and also a login. If you're not registered yet, we recommend registering, and you can just register solo, not part of an agency team, and you can go in and access all the courses without having to join a team. However, if you're a manager and you want to sign people up and create a learning team for your agency, you go to that link that says agency request and click that. And I'll open up the demo right now. Okay, like I said, you click the agency request form, fill in all these fields that are populated, and some of them are required. Answer a few questions, scroll to the bottom, and click submit. And one of the things that's asked when you do this, we're just trying to gather some information on who's registering this system. We'll get an email request when this is submitted, and we'll have everything we need to build your agency's transit team. And we will assign the team administrator role to the person who submits this form. So when this is created, we'll go in and create the team, and we'll assign you an access code that you can use. So when individuals go to register and they go in and fill out the information, they'll see at the bottom, if they have an access code, they put it here, and that individual will be automatically assigned to the team that they're assigned. So then they go in and they log in, and I'm logging in as a team administrator, so I can show you some of the functions of the LMS administrator function. So log into the home screen. You see the courses under My Courses. You can see all the courses we have here. Reasonable suspicion is located the second from the top. We'll go into that in a few minutes. And then we have some other tabs up here, resources, transcript. You can go in and keep track of your users' transcripts. You can download a PDF of their completions or non-completions. Have that ready for them. Download it to their computer. Add it to their HR file. And then when you're an admin, you can go into the LMS admin tab, and you'll see your team. See all your people you've added to your team, or they have added themselves. You can manage your team. You'll see in the Getting Started guide that I've attached to this webinar on how to manage your agency's team. You can add people, delete people, and pretty much everyone who registers in the system is registered to all courses. So you don't need to assign courses. They just go to the My Courses section of the training, and they go over access to training. that's that. I'm told Diana has arrived. Diana, are you online?
I am here. Can you hear me
Okay.
okay?
I can.
Oh, what a
So
panic.
I just, yeah, I've been in that panic before. I was getting a little worried. So I just give an overview of a quick overview of our e-learning system located at eLearning.nationalrtap.org. I handed out some handouts attached to this webinar on how to access the system, how to get registered, and then where to find the courses. And so,
Excellent.
yeah. So earlier this year, we got together and we put a contract out to create this training. Diana was hired as a subject matter expert to help the team put together a training module that would fulfill the training requirements of the FTA. So, Diana, you want to start?
Sure, thank you. First, I just want to apologize for the delay in getting on. You know, technology isn't always my friend, so sometimes it works in my favor, sometimes not. So I apologize right off the bat for that. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of describe the purpose of, and I'm sure Neil has already touched on this, but the purpose of the training. CBT, the computer-based training, is to meet the requirements for supervisors and other company officials, whomever the employer is going to designate to have the authority to make reasonable suspicion testing decisions, being able to recognize the signs and symptoms of possible impairment, possible alcohol misuse or prohibited drug use, and being able to execute that testing in accordance with FTA rule.
Hey, Diana, can you let us know
Yes.
when you want us to show your screen?
I don't have anything on my screen
Okay.
to show you. So
Okay, just be clear.
yeah, that's okay. I let the organizers know that there's, you know, everything we're looking at here is what's on your screen. So we're good with that.
Okay.
But the idea being that this is a one-stop shop, which I think is great, so that employers can have supervisory personnel or other company officials. Like I said, you know, a lot of transit agencies are under the assumption that someone has to hold a supervisor job title in order to receive this training to become authorized to make reasonable suspicion testing decisions. And that's actually not the case. You know, obviously an employer would want to select a reliable employee, but it doesn't have to be someone who is a supervisor role. So we would want to look at employees or members of your employment team that have frequent interaction with safety sensitive employees. You'd want to look to those individuals that are there that would be the most likely to be able to observe and assess when someone may be impaired. So for example, in the dispatch category, someone who is a lead dispatcher, for example, who works in the early morning hours when very few of a transit agency upper level management are even in the building, they make a great candidate for this type of training and authorization because they're going to have that initial face-to-face interface with a safety-sensitive employee, particularly drivers, operators, in the early morning hours when they're reporting for duty. So they make a great candidate for having this education, this training, and then thus becoming authorized under the FTA rule to, you know, retain an employee when there's potential for them to have been impaired by drugs or alcohol.
And we did, we had some, in our course, we have some video scenarios that we added to the training that go over those type of situations where they, you know, the dispatcher observes the driver coming in, and then you get to see the follow-up on how they make reasonable suspicion determinations in the correct way. So.
Exactly, and that's really the reason why we included that as one of the scenarios. We specifically wanted to highlight that dispatch category because that's an often overlooked area, but a very important individual in a transit agency that, like I said, does have that face-to-face interaction particularly in beginning of the shift and typically again at the end of the shift. So it's, that's a good candidate for this type of training and authorization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there were other videos that we did also of, that were showing the correct way to do that. And, there was just, I think they were very good quality and it was good videos because I learned a lot from that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The group that helped us at the transit agency that volunteered to be our for lack of a better word, our set for when we did the filming, they learned a lot as well as we walked through the scenario. So it was really helpful for them too, to see how these types of situations might manifest and then be addressed, in various locations and interactions between maintenance supervisors and, just any other type of operation managers and lead dispatchers and things like that. So
yeah.
It was a good experience, I think, for everybody that was involved in the making of it. And I think it's a very valuable tool for anyone that utilizes it for the training purposes.
Oh, yeah. Maybe ask Kara. Kara, do you have any questions waiting that we should answer right now? Hello? Kara?
I'm here. Somebody asked if there's no sound. I can hear.
Huh. Yeah, I think they would.
Yeah, I'm not having any issues with audio, and I can see your screen.
Right. I just thought there's one thing I was going to do, and I realized I might not be able to do, was I was going to launch the course so they could just see how it gets started. But I cannot turn the audio on because I'll get feedback, I think, through this phone call. So I apologize for that. But if you're curious, I'm going to launch it right here. You can see the course opens up. And there it is. And then it's designed where, I think we've learned in previous courses that we've had to slow down. There's some training that people take annually and they can zip through it and go to the quiz at the end and it'll show complete, so we've designed this one where you can't really cycle to the next screen until you've looked at all the content, done all the interactions. It's not a video per se, but a very interactive course with videos, quizzes, and lots of information. So
that's a really good point, Neil, to make, is that some of the other samples that I've seen from other types of training for this subject area, if folks are just viewing a video for this purpose and not really getting any interactive information, it's not as effective, obviously, as going through each of these scenarios and answering questions and getting supplemental information, which I think is one of the keys to this particular CBT that makes it so valuable, is that you can't just kind of skim through it. There's a requirement that the person being trained, whether that be the supervisor or other designated company official, receives at least 60 minutes of training on signs and symptoms of alcohol misuse, as well as an additional 60 minutes on signs and symptoms of prohibited drug use. So, in order to actually meet that FTA minimum training requirement, this program incorporates a lot of supplemental information so that if the individual is not as challenged by the questions and can move through it very quickly, and then gets to the end, they don't have to just wait for it to time out. There's other supplemental information that they can view, to kind of pass that bit of time. But either way, when they do finish it, we know that they have completed it and it's in accordance with FTA rule 655.14 to be specific. Those minimum time frame requirements are actually met. But yet the individual doesn't have to sit there and wait for it to pass by. There's other information that they can look at. So it's kind of neat the way that they designed it.
And I'll show here, like if you open the screen and you see the main screen, you go under resources and there's a whole lot of different resources and downloads you can view, and you can click on all relevant information on the regulations, and then you'll see in the outline, you can see here all the sections all throughout the course. So there's a lot of stuff here, and I think also the way we designed it, and pretty sure it still works that way. Some people might do it differently, but like if you quit the course, we just say, you got halfway done, like have to do something else. The system is designed where when you launch it, it will go back to where you were. It'll ask to be resumed, click resume, and it'll bring you right back. So we get a lot of questions on that. People find it, sometimes it's going to be challenged to sit for 60 minutes to do one training course, whereas the other course we have online is the substance abuse awareness course where you have to start that one and finish that one in 60 minutes, and you can't restart it from each section. So lessons learned, yeah.
Yeah, incidentally, the regulation doesn't require that you finish it all in one sitting, only that you have that minimum frame of training there, minimum time frame.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
And then going through the course to the very end and making sure it doesn't apply to this one, but other courses, we have our substance use awareness course where at the end of the course, there's an end button that will appear after 60 minutes. And if you close the course before that, it's not going to register or show complete. So we get calls sometimes and people say, I've been in the training and I've done it several times and it hasn't shown complete and I can't get a certificate, and then I look so I can look at the transcripts in the report, and I look, oh, wow, well, they probably closed the window the wrong way. Some browsers, it doesn't work. The system doesn't work well with old browsers. Internet Explorer is one that, is continues to give us challenges, and we find that with people using those, we encourage, to use Google Chrome or Firefox or Edge browser. I think they work very well.
Yeah, I wanted to if you could go back to that screen you were just on, if you could for a second, Neil. Just wanted to make a comment about some of the design choices because there was a lot of thought put into this. If anyone has seen the FTA's recent, I think 2018, not that recent, but pretty recent, drug abuse awareness video that they produced, which is awesome. The designers of this particular CBT chose to have a very similar look to the icons that are used for the various substances, and that was intentional to be congruent with that same visual aspect that the FTA used in their video, so that it becomes kind of more familiar and sort of has a consistency among the different types of training that an individual that's covered by the same regulation would be viewing. So they really did put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, and actually that video we actually is also living on our course catalog. If we go into our course catalog and you look in the list of courses, I need to shut that window. You'll see the FTA drug abuse awareness video, and it's a 60-minute video and launches out. And there you go.
Yeah, there you can see that the very similar design choices were made so that it would be consistent. So users would become more, familiar with those types of icons, and I thought that was kind of neat that they chose to have that consistency in their design elements. Both of these, by the way, this is also a really great tool that FTA prepared for meeting that. This is the training that all covered employees would receive. Of course, the one that we're discussing in this webinar would be for folks that are getting their training and authorization to make reasonable suspicion referrals. But, obviously this is similar in nature.
Mm-hmm. And then so you go through the training and you complete all the sections and you go through, and then when you're complete, it sends a completion to the system, and then you can download and launch a certificate of completion. So there you go.
Which let me make a little remark about this. It's important to know that when you do have an employee who completes this training, supervisor or other company official, and they have obtained this certificate, it's important that that be retained on file for the life of the trained employee with your agency. Even though the regulation for training record retention is only 2 years, as a best practice, it's important to maintain these types of training documents because this particular training is only required one time. So let's say, for example, that Neil, you can see here that he took this training on March 19th of 2019. So he has a training certificate. That is applicable to him for the life of his employment with the transit agency. So if he should have to make a reasonable suspicion testing decision in 2025, if we had purged the records after only 2 years, which is the minimum retention period under the rule, we would not have any way to demonstrate that Neil was authorized to make that reasonable suspicion testing decision in 2025. So it's important to hold on to these. These records are extremely valuable to maintain because if that test result, leads to positive drug test, or an alcohol violation, we want to be able to represent that Neil had the training and authority necessary to give him the authority to have issued the testing of that individual. So it's very valuable to hold on to these certificates is the bottom line there.
It is actually. I learned a pretty cool thing about our system. I got a call from a former employee of an agency that has a team in our system, and he calls me and says, I need my certificates, but I can't get on my account because I no longer work at the agency. So no, and he said, I need them today because I'm about to start a new job and they're only going to let me work if I have the certificates. So he tells me the name of his new agency, and I look online. I'll give you a little peek into the capabilities of our system. So he gives me the name of his new agency, and they have a team in the system. And he says, I work for another system now, and what we can do is we can go into any agency, and we go to the learners, or go to learner management. We can assign that same employee to a new team. So all their transcripts and certificates and everything follows them to the new agency. So this particular individual is very, very happy that he had all, because he did the whole list of training on our catalog, and he was very happy that we were able to get him his certificates. So that's pretty cool.
That is not just cool. Yeah. That's a fantastic resource for sure. Yeah, because, the regulation, it's interesting. There's been, years ago, the thought was that each new employer had to deliver the training to that employee for whatever topic area was applicable. So looking at, let's say, reasonable suspicion, if I leave, ABC Transit and I go to XYZ Transit, if I can bring my training records with me to demonstrate that I've met these training requirements, then the XYZ Transit doesn't need to deliver that same training. So it is under the regulation, it is permitted for that training, provided that it was delivered in accordance with the rule originally. If it meets the requirements, that it can be transferred to that next employer and still valid for that particular supervisor. That's a great feature of this.
Yeah,
of your
it
program.
is, and you can see now the total number of learners we have registered in the system is 11,703. So we have plenty of users that are in the system. We have an actual license for about 1,500 active. That's within a 2-3 month window. That you can, if you don't log on within that window, you're not counted toward our license. So we've been keeping up with it. We may need to increase it after this webinar, but it's been manageable. And you see, we have teams in all 50 states, Guam, and Puerto Rico. So we're getting some learners from all over. So all these are the FTA regions, and yep.
That's great. Yeah, a lot of people do ask the question, can I do this as a transit agency team? And I get asked that question a lot. So it's great that you have that capability to do that.
Yes. So we had a question about the course itself. I'm not sure exactly what the question is. Kara, do you want to elaborate?
Yes, just sort of to go over briefly what is in the course content.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Would you like me to do that,
Relaunch.
Neil?
Yes, yeah, if you can.
Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about it. So essentially, what it starts out doing is, identifying the prohibited substances, of course, that are part of the FTA, US DOT drug testing program, looking at each of those individually. What are the signs and symptoms of those? What a user of those prohibited substances may experience by using them. It spends a lot of time talking about because that's really the purpose of the course, is talking about specifically what kind of impact taking someone that's using those drugs would experience, and how the supervisor who's being trained might recognize the signs and symptoms that are indicators of the prohibited drug use. And then it spends, of course, a lot of additional time talking the same way about, alcohol misuse. And so it really delves into a lot of detail about signs and symptoms of each of the 5 prohibited drug classes, and then as well as alcohol. So it's very comprehensive. And of course, like I said, it's covering what's required to be covered to meet the FTA, the regulation regarding the training of those who are going to be authorized to make reasonable suspicion testing decisions, testing determinations.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to get into a little more detail, since I see you've got it up right now, we can talk a little bit about some of the subcategories if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be good.
Why don't you click on the slang and code words? That's kind of an interesting one, if you can, Neil.
It's not going to let me because I have
okay.
reset my course.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, for the purposes of demonstration, you're restricted because you actually have to move through each of the sections in order to be able to go to the next. Yeah, so I get that.
I mean, if we had 3 hours, I could do
it. Right. I don't think anybody wants to be on a webinar for 3 hours to see it, but hopefully they'll go to it themselves, to make their assessment on. That's probably really the only way to truly understand what it covers, is to actually sit and go through the course, and they'll have a better understanding of what all is covered. But from a general perspective, it's really focusing on and delving into psychologically how drugs affect the mind, affect the body, and what kind of signs and symptoms one would recognize. So it's really very educational. In fact, during the process of reviewing the material as the design team was putting it together, I learned a lot myself, actually, because although I deal with drug and alcohol testing regulations, I don't have a background in the psychoactive substances and how they impact psychologically and physiologically impact the body. So I learned quite a bit myself going through this process. So.
Well, I hope this might add something to this. Can we talk more about reasonable suspicion? Yes, and like I mentioned earlier, we have these video scenarios that are included in the course where they go over things. And I'll give you another example of one that's in the courses where the manager knows the employee, and actually they're related cousins or something, and he knows the people she hangs out with. He smelled marijuana at some point, but that was a situation where that was not the correct way to do a reasonable suspicion determination, because he was basing things on that were not, what was it called, contemporaneous?
Right, they were not contemporaneous. So in that particular scenario, I'm glad you brought that one up. It's probably my favorite of them all. The individual, like you said, they are related, not closely related, but they know each other's family members and friends, the supervisor and the employee. And he gets a whiff of marijuana on her coat as she's coming in the morning. He doesn't see any signs that the individual is exhibiting, the young lady in the scenario. He doesn't see any, redness of the eyes or any other types of symptoms, but he jumps the gun because he knows that there's people that she, quote unquote, hangs around with, who he knows or he has been aware of or been made aware of that use marijuana. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic there, and one that I think plays out a lot, particularly in the rural transit community, because we are connected. We're in a smaller community, so we do sometimes know one another's family members and friends and the circle of friends that they hang with. So it's an interesting scenario. Yeah. And just
Yeah.
if someone's interested more about reasonable suspicion and actually making the referral, we cover all of that as well in this training. So it covers things like not just how to recognize the signs and symptoms, but also how to approach the employee the proper way, how to address, how the conversation should go, meaning, not in an accusatory way, in a fitness for duty as being the ultimate overriding message is that, we're concerned about your ability to perform your job safely. We're concerned about your fitness for duty today, rather than in an accusatory, I think you're doing drugs kind of a way. So we focus on that a lot. And then we also focus on the documentation, how to prepare and maintain documentation for the purposes of, just having a defendable result, so that, you can show that a trained individual was the one who made the decision to move towards testing based on specific contemporaneous articulable observations. And those words come from the regulation. We're looking for specific, meaning not vague. If you say someone is acting goofy today, that's not a specific sign or symptom. If someone has dilated pupils, that is a specific sign or symptom that may indicate substance use. We also address the contemporaneous, meaning that it has to be in the here and now. It's not something that you saw last week and now you're kind of mulling it over and deciding that you're going to execute a test because of what you saw last week. It has to be in the here and now. And of course, we also, in a couple of scenarios, we address the hearsay, how we cannot use third-party information or gossip or rumor. The trained supervisor has to be the one that actually observes the individual.
Yes. Yes. And then the other term that we included in the regulation is that it is included in the regulation is articulable. That how the determination and how they describe it, document it, and do the referral. So.
Right, exactly. Specific, contemporaneous, articulable observations, and they have to be concerning the employee's behavior, speech, body odor, appearance, things of that nature. So we break that down in the training to help the learner understand what the regulation means and how it would need to be applied. So it does a good job at describing what the requirements are, and remember that the requirements are really spelling out to the learner when that individual, once trained, of course, is actually authorized to conduct a reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kara, do we have any more questions?
There's somebody, David Brown, with his hands raised. I'm going to unmute him.
Okay.
David, you had a question? David Brown's still here. The questions that were in the question box were mostly technical issues about there is another question. Carlos, I've unmuted you if you want to ask your question. Carlos Arismendi, do you have a question? No.
They could also type them in the box.
Raised.
Okay.
So I can see you're going through some.
Everybody, in case anybody else wants to ask a question.
There you go. I can see on the slide there that we're talking about, exactly what we were just saying, the 60 minutes of training on the physical, behavioral, and performance indicators of drug use, and the 60 minutes of training on the behavioral, speech, and performance indicators of alcohol misuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me just talk about maybe the background of our e-learning system in general. We decided that having the hard copies, that we would send out to agencies, rural, tribal transit agencies, they are very useful. They were designed so people can train trainers within their agency and deliver the training on site, thereby lowering the cost of having trainers come out to their agency and perform a training, or sending their staff out to access training. So we know there was a need, and budgets are limited, and we wanted to get this required training out to these agencies that are rural and tribal, so they'll have more access to this type of training. And we know that in some of these agencies there's high turnover. Drivers come and go, and fulfilling the regulations and staying compliant is important. So I think immediately after we launched the safety, the substance abuse awareness course, and that quickly became the most popular course that we have online. Let me see if I go in there right now. I just give a little example of the numbers.
While you're looking that up, I just want to say real quickly that another thing that I think is interesting that we covered in the reasonable suspicion course is we touched on the fatal transportation events that kind of led to two of them we discussed. There are others, but two kind of that were the catalyst to the federally mandated drug and alcohol testing program, the genesis of it. So that's very interesting, and it's important, I think, to include that in training that we deliver to supervisory personnel and other company officials that are going to be in this role of making reasonable suspicion testing decisions, because it reminds them of the importance of their role in being the eyes and the ears of the transit system. So I was happy that we were able to incorporate some older newspaper clips and even video from those accident events that occurred back in 1991 and 1987. So kind of neat, little historical piece there.
Neil and Diana, we just got two questions, and I'll read. The first one is from Andrew Williams. Is the program available in a classroom format for those agencies wanting classroom rather than e-learning?
I can answer that. So when we first finished this course, I had actually had it open and online, uploaded, and getting ready to have it beta tested. And then I was called to present at this conference in Montana, and I arrived there and I was told that two other speakers that were on the agenda for that day had that couldn't make it to the training, and asked me if I could fill in for them. So I had nothing really to talk about. I had a presentation I delivered before, but I thought it was a great opportunity to beta test this course. So I put it on the screen and we went through it as a group, and basically you can do it in that way. I was able to do it. The only question is when you do that, the certificates won't be populated by the system. You got to have we produced a PDF certificate that we can send to agencies to their training supervisors, transit managers, who can, oversee the training and deliver it in a classroom in that type of setting. And then they can sign off on the certificates that they can attest that this individual completed the training. And then there you go. So that seems to be working out in at least a couple agencies that we've been working with.
And Neil, if you don't mind, can I plug in another FTA sponsored training under this topic, if it's okay with you?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. The Transportation Safety Institute has a 4-hour seminar that covers this topic area, reasonable suspicion, as well as post-accident decision making, because the similar folks are making both of those kinds of decisions, and that is available, throughout the country at various locations. And of course, an agency can also become a host for that TSI class, and you know, and that way be able to have their seats filled with their internal supervisors, and then it's opened to other agencies in their area that would like to join. So there are opportunities under FTA-sponsored classes and courses for the classroom style training on this topic, but I think the value in this particular CBT is, as Neil mentioned, you know, the fact that because it's so difficult for folks to travel, especially in rural transit, budgets and, you know, the other things that restrict us from being able to travel, you know, this makes a really great opportunity to have in-house, good quality in-house training.
Yeah, I was actually at a conference, tribal transportation meeting last week, and I asked the group about constraints to training and getting their staff trained, and one of them replied is that their staff is so small that when they need to travel out of town to do any training, they basically have to shut down the system. So that's a huge constraint. You know, you got people relying on rides for medical purposes and things, and you know that should be very hard.
We got another question from Melissa Farians. How do you take the actual course? I know you went over that at the beginning, maybe for some of the people who came a little later.
Okay. Well, sure. I direct them to the handouts that are attached to this webinar. And you see there's the e-learning handout, and that shows a step-by-step directions on how to access the course, where to find it, how to get signed up, and it goes through, it's like a 5-step process. Then you get in the system, and you're online, and then you go to My Courses, and then you'll see once you're registered and you're in the system, the course is listed here. You click open, and hit launch. There you go. Okay. Any other questions?
Not currently, but let's wait another minute.
Well, we'll wait. I think in the meantime, what I can do is I can give a plug to it. Okay, ahead.
Okay, Mary Seppi. Mary, can you voice your question or type it into the question box? I sent you an audio pin if you're using the computer. Not sure if we can get her question right now.
Okay. Well, while we wait, I can just basically give a quick plug-in for a National RTAP. We have Kara online, and maybe she could speak to some of the other training resources we have. You see, if you go on the e-learning website and you go to the National RTAP logo, and you click on that, it'll bring you to our homepage, and you'll see our training tab where the other training is available. So Kara, did you want to talk about any of that really quick while we wait for questions?
Sure, let me share my screen quickly.
Well, while Kara's doing that, I wanted to make one point real quick, and that is that the reasonable suspicion webinar, or I'm sorry, the reasonable suspicion CBT that we're talking about on this webinar does include the category of opioids, which many realize that, you know, that was changed from opiates in 2018 to opioids. So it's expanded that testing panel to include some of the semi-synthetic drugs. And I don't believe that there's any other training out there right now, reasonable suspicion training for FTA, covered employers and employees, that actually incorporates that expanded panel. So this was made during a time when we were able to incorporate that relatively new piece of the regulation.
Yes, and we actually had to go back and update our other course that we have to change that section on to opioids. Yes.
We just got Mary's question. Does the course show you if you are able to quit in the middle and save, or if it has to be completed in one session?
So if you quit in the middle, it will close, and then when you go to open it again on the same account and you open up the course, it'll have a button that appears that says resume, or a smaller one below that says restart. So you can resume for where you left off. Other courses you cannot do that, but this course you can. Or some other courses you cannot do that, but yeah, this one you can.
Okay. And we also have a question from Kevin Wassam. It's actually a comment. He recommends keeping the completion certificates for purposes of documentation during an FTA compliant review. Good point, Kevin.
And I get those phone calls. Seems like the reviewers are on site, and then my phone starts ringing about getting certificates for staff, and the basically, as an administrator, you don't see the certificates for the completions. You can see the transcript, but it's up to the user learner that logs in to print and download the certificate on their own, and then they give that to their agency. So if their staff haven't done that, and maybe they don't work there anymore, or they have new staff and they don't know how to access their PDFs, and now they're under review and they want their certificates right away, so we have to go in and I'll download them and send them to them via email.
I actually have a question
about a follow-up question. If you can't restart the courses, will it tell you at the beginning so a user knows?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the other one, I think the other one says that in the instructions. The substance use awareness course that we put together, there's 2 modules, and there's module 1 that's not timed. You go through it, and it has instructions on how to do the course and how to finish the course. And they include the instructions about closing it. And then the module 2, which is timed for 60 minutes, and then you go through that one. And so if you need to do both modules in order to know that, though.
Hey, Neil, I actually have a question for you as well. Okay. So when you have a team, like when you have a transit agency that signs up for the team, does the, I guess for lack of a better word, but the administrator, if there is one of that team, do they have access to the record, the printed certificate, or is that still just the user that gets that printed certificate?
The actual certificate is only can only be accessed through the user, because it's located on their course list, and then that certificate will be populated with their name. Now, the administrator does have access to reports. So we have a section in the admin tab called reports, and then you can go through, and there's about a dozen different reports that you can query. You go in and you have to select filters. You can select which individuals are on the team. You can select what courses, and then you can select sort of the time frame. I want to look at all the completions. I want to look at just the last one, or this specific time frame, this month, last month, and then you go in and you click generate, and it produces a report that pops up on the screen with all the information you requested, the time, the date, the name, the duration that they spent. And then you can go in and download that as a PDF or an Excel file. And then you kind of can look at your team and analyze, who's doing what and who's done what and who needs to be refresher training. So that's one of the higher level admin functions they have. And I'm not sure how often people use it, but I know there is a couple agencies out there that do. And I know one particular one, they send me an email, seems like every year. They want to reset all their learners' accounts to delete all their completions. Everyone starts from scratch. And then they have a new report. They can show that last year and this year. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. What I was going to say about that, I'm glad to hear that that's an option, because, a lot of times when I'm on doing compliance reviews, the transit agency assumes that what they have to have as documentation is an actual certificate, and that's not actually the case. There's nothing in the regulation that requires that certificate, just that there is documentation that the course was was delivered and that the individual participated in the minimum amount of time that's required. So, for example, with reasonable suspicion, and speaking of that specifically, a report would be sufficient for a transit agency to retain when the auditor or compliance officer, whomever, whether it be the state DOT or FTA, that would be sufficient documentation, I would think, for them to show the employees that completed the course. So that's really good.
Mm-hmm. And, we do have access, like I said, in the reports and in the transcripts. Sometimes there's an agency out there and the drivers may be a little reluctant to do these training. And, the good thing about it is you can do it at work. You can log in at home. You can log in. I think most of the courses work on, a tablet. You can do them wherever. We have a computer in our break room where our staff goes and they do some training there. They pull up the training while they're on their coffee break, or we have refresher training. And then we have those individuals who do zip through the training, and sometimes we have individuals who do the substance use awareness training, and they either use the wrong browser or they click the window to close it, and they don't see the end button, or they do see it and they just close the window. Well, when it doesn't complete, they just spent an hour of their time doing the training and they want their certificate, so they call me and they say, all right, I'll look. Or I'll get a call from a transit manager who says, George says that he went through that training and completed it and he can't get his certificate. So I'll look in the reports and I'll query George and I'll say, well, I see George did the training, but he completed it in 15 minutes. It's not going to show complete. So I send them the transcript and I say, you might want to have George do it again. And they'll sometimes say, well, George says he was in there for 60 minutes. And then sort of, I'm like, well, the transcript does not say that, but I can't give you a certificate because, is it possible? And, then we kind of give them an option, is that perhaps he logged in as somebody else and did the training, and sometimes that might be the case. So we just encourage everybody, just log in on your own account, do the training on, under your account, and download your certificates, Yeah. Okay, Kara.
Okay. Finishing up, and you really covered a lot, and everybody's ready to go out and make reasonable suspicion for referrals. I'm just going to send an email with our eLearning email address if you have any further questions, and we will have this presentation up on our website within a week. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Diana. And thank you, all of our attendees.
Hey, thank you guys for helping. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Neil.
And thanks all the attendees for joining. It's been very helpful.